Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of America's absolute strangest natural mysteries. Just picture this for a second. You're standing right at the edge of a roaring waterfall. You pick up a heavy log off the forest floor, you heave it over the edge, and you wait for it to pop back up in the rapids below. But you wait, and, well, nothing happens. It just vanishes. Forever. Now, this isn't some crazy scene out of a sci-fi novel, and it definitely isn't an optical illusion. This is a very real place. Welcome to the Devil's Kettle.
Here is the chilling, on-the-ground reality of this anomaly. When something goes into the Devil's Kettle, there's no satisfying splash at the bottom. There's no debris churning around in an eddy downstream. There is literally zero trace of whatever just went in. For decades, curious hikers and totally baffled scientists have stood in the exact spot you're imagining right now. They throw things into this abyss, fully expecting the basic laws of physics to eventually spit them back out. But the kettle? It just takes them. It swallows everything.
So what does this all mean? Well, it brings us to the ultimate question, the real core of our investigation today. Where on earth does it all go? I mean, how can half of a raging river simply disappear into the ground without leaving a single clue? It's a puzzle that has completely stumped hydrologists, geologists, and pretty much anyone who's ever visited. So today, we're going to sift through the evidence, look at some of the wilder theories out there, and uncover exactly what science has to say about this massive geological magic trick.
Okay, let's set the scene of the crime, so to speak. We are deep inside Minnesota's Judge C.R. Magny State Park. It is this gorgeous, rugged landscape packed with thick forests and rushing water. Specifically, the Brule River, which cuts its way right through the bedrock heading toward Lake Superior. Honestly, everything feels perfectly normal and incredibly scenic, right up until you hit this one very specific rocky cliff, where the river suddenly and violently splits right down the middle. And this brilliantly illustrates what makes this spot so mind-bending. When you hit that split, you're looking at two entirely different realities side by side. On the left, you've got a perfectly normal waterfall. The water cascades down the rocks, continues downstream, doing exactly what water is supposed to do. But on the right side, the water pours directly into this massive, cavernous pothole carved right into the rock, the Devil's Kettle. It drops into this giant hole, and it just vanishes. You literally have two halves of the exact same river playing by totally different rules. One follows nature's laws, and the other just drops completely off the map.
So, faced with a literal hole in the earth that swallows a river, human curiosity naturally goes into overdrive. Which brings us to the detective phase of the story, gathering evidence. Over the years, eager tourists, park rangers, and some very determined scientists decided to use the Devil's Kettle as their own personal test lab. Their logic was pretty straightforward. If you want to know where a hole leads, you drop something in and see where it pops out, right? Well, nature had other plans.
The sheer scale of the frustration these researchers faced is honestly staggering. It started simple enough. People threw in logs, huge, buoyant chunks of wood that should easily bob to the surface downstream. Nothing. So they escalated things. They poured brightly colored dye into the falls, fully expecting the river below to turn neon green or red. Still nothing. Then came the ping-pong ball phase. Hundreds of them. They're incredibly light, literally impossible to sink. And yeah, you guessed it, not a single one was ever seen again. Finally, they brought out the big guns. They tossed heavily armored GPS trackers into the falls, thinking they could just watch a screen and map the journey. And the grand total result of all those experiments? Zero. Absolutely zero items have ever shown up downstream. Not one log, not a single ping-pong ball, not even a faint tint of colored dye in the water. And those expensive, high-tech GPS trackers? Their signals were instantly swallowed up by the crushing water and dense rock. They never transmitted a single blip of location data. We're talking decades of people throwing things into this abyss, and the final tally remains a perfect, unbroken zero.
Now, you know what happens when science fails to give us answers, right? Our imaginations completely take over. Since absolutely no physical evidence was surfacing, people started brainstorming their own explanations. Let's call them the usual suspects. The most grounded theory was that the water was flowing into this massive, hidden underground cave system. Other folks went a bit further, suggesting the kettle had a secret, subterranean connection to a totally different lake miles and miles away. And of course, because we all love a good sci-fi twist, some people genuinely claimed it was a portal to another dimension, basically a localized black hole right in the middle of a Minnesota state park.
Well, as fun as a multi-dimensional portal sounds, the experts decided to stick to the most logical suspect: hidden caves. So the investigation pivoted. Geologists and hydrologists spent years meticulously surveying the surrounding area, looking specifically for massive underground tunnels. And the logic totally makes sense, right? If half a river is vanishing into a hole, it has to be rushing through some vast, cavernous system under the bedrock. They just needed to find the front door.
But in a massively frustrating twist for everyone involved, that prime suspect was completely cleared. All those extensive surveys and geological mappings, they turned up absolutely nothing. No massive cave system capable of holding that much rushing water was ever found. See, the bedrock in that area is mostly volcanic, stuff like rhyolite and basalt, and those types of rocks just don't typically dissolve to form the giant, cavernous limestone caves that could swallow a whole river. So the mystery only grew, drawing in people from all over the world trying to crack the case, but the answer was still nowhere in sight.
Okay, let's dive into this, because eventually the scientific community realized they needed a totally new approach. After years of failed experiments and thousands of missing ping pong balls, researchers decided to stop looking for what was lost and instead just measure what was already there. It was time for the actual scientific verdict.
Researchers hauled in some incredibly sophisticated hydrology equipment, specifically stream gauges. Their goal was to carefully measure the sheer volume of the water flowing above the waterfall and then compare it to the volume of the river flowing far below it. And you know what? That's what finally cracked the case. The volume of water above the split was almost exactly the same as the volume flowing downstream below the falls. The math finally added up. So the water's true journey is actually a three-step process. First, it plunges into the kettle. Second, and this is key, instead of flowing into one giant cave, it gets forced under immense pressure through a massive network of hidden intricate cracks running right beneath the rocks. And third, it eventually just rejoins the main river a bit downstream, entirely out of our sight.
But here is the thing. While the math proves the water eventually rejoins the river, nature is still stubbornly keeping some of her secrets. As the researchers themselves noted, the exact underground path has never been directly mapped. We know the final destination, sure, but the actual physical route that water takes as it violently weaves through those pressurized volcanic rocks, it's completely hidden. And as for all those logs and ping pong balls, the sheer crushing pressure of that water either completely obliterates them or they're just permanently stuck down in some underground rocky maze, ground to dust before they could ever see daylight again.
So, even today, armed with all our incredible modern technology, the Devil's Kettle still manages to keep part of its secret. The actual journey remains completely hidden beneath our feet. Honestly, it's a fantastic reminder that no matter how much data we collect or how advanced our tracking gadgets become, nature still holds some profoundly beautiful mysteries. Sometimes the answer is right there in the math, but the physical reality of the journey stays locked away in the earth.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder. If you were standing right there today, right beside the roaring edge of the Devil's Kettle, feeling the mist on your face and staring down into that dark, churning abyss, would you dare throw something into it? Would you try to be the one person to finally beat the odds and track an item down a stream? Or would you just step back, respect the awesome power of the unknown, and leave the mystery totally untouched? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. I really hope you found this deep dive as fascinating as I did. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.